So, welcome to the Scottish Jazz Archive, Hamish, and thanks for giving of your time today. And I thought I'd ask first how you first got into jazz. What?
How did I first get into jazz? Well, I guess I was sick. Well, at school, it was hit things, strum things, do all sorts of things. And from an early age, there was a banjo lele in the house, in mum and dad's house, which was a tiny wee thing, four strings, ain't she sweet. So I was just doing daft things from a very young age, three chords, all the usual sort of stuff. But at the age of 16, having uh, having got through O levels, my father says, uh, "Would you like something?" And I said, "Well," I blurted out the word clarinet because I thought that sounded sort of sensible, as opposed to buy me a car or some other silly nonsense. Any case, so I was given a clarinet, a plastic clarinet for my 16th birthday. And yeah, I mean, it all went downhill from there. I guess very early influences, obviously, that was in the early 60s. And it was still the Dixieland trad jazz thing going on in the UK with all the names that we know and love from yesteryear. Most of them dead now, but that and so and there were some great television programs in black and white. 6-5 Special with Don Lang and his Frantic Five, and Chris Barber was on it the whole time, and yeah, it was a great time to be around because it was very vibrant, particularly in that genre. The Palais de Danse in Fountain Bridge was running n nights a week with the revolving stage, and I used to go there, in school holidays and listen to the bands that would come through, the pro bands that would come through, and I've got photographs of me as a wee face in a dot in a vast audience standing around the stage in the Palais. Yeah. Any case, when I left school, I knew that I wanted to play the clarinet in some shape or form. Not sadly full time because there was a family business to consider. But nevertheless, I started my first. I got involved in my first band aged 18. And there were guys that I knew way back then. Pete Martin, who's still around, I believe living in Manchester. Um, where does the Brian Keddy, who's around, and a whole bunch of guys lived in Edinburgh at the time, and I used to sneak out of school with other pals, and we would just play. That was huge fun, huge fun. Any case, moving on. Yeah, I started my first band. Um, Guys like Johnny Harper, who now lives in Norway, played banjo in the band, and Graham Blamire was involved, and um, Jackie Graham, who's no longer with us. I was playing trombone in those days, in the very, very early days. When I was at school, I mean, having got a clarinet within 2 years, I'd sort of I had an alto sax, trombone. I was bugling, anything that you could blow. I was probably having a go at.
And,
Um,
and did you have formal lessons in any of these, or did you pick them all up yourself?
it's pretty much self-taught in everything. It's a how do I make a noise out of this? It's on a need to basis, so which is fun. And how on earth did he? Listening to loads of records and Benny Goodman and all these guys, how did they do that? And I would take a phrase, like 4 bars or something, listen to what you do, and I would just try and play that phrase over and over. And that gives you an element of technique, not the right way to do it, but it's the way I did it, and that kind of worked for me. Um, and then uh, the word break is never the right word to use, certainly in my circumstances. But I did get a break band wise very early on when I was 19. There was a club in Edinburgh called the Manhattan Club, which is at the end of Waterloo Place. It's no longer there. It burnt down very sadly. And it was a casino, an eating joint, and up at the top deck was the club. It was a dry club, there was no booze. But having said that, there was more booze in there than you could swing a cat because it was all imported quietly under a raincoat. which was great fun. And at the age of 19, this was all very exciting and so on and so forth. In any case, I used to go there every weekend, Friday and Saturday, and the resident band was a band called Old Bailey's Jazz Advocates, run by a marvelous guy called Archie Sinclair, who had a day job, and his day job was working for an advertising agency. He was the guy, I understand, who thought up the slogan "Beans means Heinz," or was it Heinz means beans? Whatever. He thought up that slogan. He did loads of slogan type work, and he always told me. He taught me lots of things, but he said if you're advertising and you hold up a newspaper, and if you can't see your advert within 2 seconds, it's a waste of time putting it in there. It's got to stick out, got to jump out at you. And he said, as few words as possible. In life, that was one of his mantras, as few words as possible. In any case, I used to tug at his coat strings in the Manhattan Club. Can I get a blow with your band? A real youngster, really green. And he very kindly would invite me to blow a couple of numbers. And then the next thing, I ended up being his roadie, for want of a better word, and driving them around, because I bought a van at that stage for my first wagon. It was really rickety stuff, but nothing fancy. And I remember they did a gig in Stirling, and I won't give any names of the guys in the band at that point, but it was quite funny. I was driving it, and an argument ensued in the back of the bus. Graham will probably tell you the story, because he was one of the guys that was there. Graham Blamire, that is, and one by one, everybody got fired. Archie said, "You're fired." He went around everybody. They all ended up firing. And the clarinetist at that time hadn't really said a word, and I was just driving the bus. I had no idea where this was going. And he ended up firing the entire band. And as I was dropping him off at his house, the last person, he said, "What are you doing on Friday?" I said, "I don't think I'm doing anything." He said, "Right, you're hired." And then apparently on the Monday morning, he phoned everybody. He wanted to phone back up and said, "Did I fire you?" "Oh, forget it. I didn't mean that." Blah, blah, blah. So a band reassembled with me playing clarinet in it. In any case, that's the story. And I played with Archie for a couple of years, and it was a huge learning curve. I mean, a very fast learning curve, because his band in those days was probably working an average of 4 nights a week, which is unheard of, even in today's work, and on a busy week, we could do 7 gigs. That the work was there. I guess television wasn't as big as it is, and other things, and it was still going. So, and I'll tell you a story, which is again against myself, because but it's funny and I like it, and it's a true story. We've done a week where we had a gig on the Tuesday, 2 on the Wednesday, 1 on the Thursday, 2 on the Friday, and 2 on the Saturday, and 1 on the Sunday. And the one on the Sunday ended up in near Callendar. I've completely forgotten the name of the place, but it was this kind of a restaurant type joint. We were in the doing the gig, not a soul there. And I also was driving them, so it was doing a daytime job, these gigs at night, so on and so forth. And eventually 2, like what I would describe as the best thing I could say, was 2 busloads of Glasgow typists arrived, all girls in there, and they didn't want to hear jazz at all. They wanted this new beat music which was going around, and so we were the wrong band, the wrong everything, and it was just one of those nights where you were going through the motions. And Archie sidled over to me, and I was going through the motions, and he just moved the trombone off his lips, looked at me and said, "If you don't smile, you're fired." What a salutary lesson that was. Ding! Oh, okay. So I never forgot that. That was one of life's truisms. In any case, I was with Archie for a couple of years, and then I left the band, and I went laterally. I started many different types of wee bands, but a very successful one, which was not necessarily in the jazz vein, but it was a band called the Memphis Roadshow, which was a 10-piece soul band. And early soul music in those days was Wilson Pickett's and Otis Redding's and all these guys from the 60s. They were what people were listening to. So I started a 10-piece soul band, and it had some players in it. I mean, Pete Martin was one of my first. It was 2 trumpets, tenor, baritone, Hammond organ, twin Leslies, drums, bass guitar, big guitar. My tenor player was a guy called Gordon Cruikshanks, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, but well known. He was then, I'm going to say 16, living down halfway at the junction bar, halfway down Leith Walk, just off in Pilbury, with his mum and family, and he was just an amazing guy to have in the band because he was so enthusiastic. And if I said to him, "Can you, this is how I need it to sound," no problem. What do you need? I'll give you. So when I mentioned the word Junior Walker, he said, "I'm your man." And he was more Junior Walker than Junior Walker. He just nailed the style and the genre perfectly. So that band ran very successfully for a couple of years, and I took that band to France and Spain, amongst other places. And it did a lot of university work and was very popular. And again, I think I would be right in saying that in the 67, 68, that sort of period, there must have been at least half a dozen clubs, stroke places you could play in town, all booking bands 5, 6, 7 nights a week. These places don't exist. Along Prince Street, where Watches of Switzerland may well still be, for all I know, but above it was the West End Club. Was that? I can't remember the name specifically, but it was the West End Club. There was the Casablanca and Rose Street. There was clubs up Lothian Road, which don't exist. There was a place called Frisco, which doesn't exist, which was down the high street between where Jury's Hotel is. In fact, that's where Frisco's was. And back from that on the high street was Magoo's. Again, none of these places are there now, but they were all booking bands, and it was a hot time. I mean, I was, again, daytime job, but I was working 4 nights a week on average for sure, making music. No time to rehearse, just work gigs, doing the gigs, and enjoying myself. And it was a very vibrant time in Edinburgh. I guess that took us to the late 60s. Again, Memphis Roadshow, that went, the final of the finale of that band is when we went to the south of France with a kind of reduced band because it was too big to take on tour. And we had a terrific time down in that part, doing the summer season, if you will, on the beaches of the south of France, ending up in a place called Playa. No, it wasn't Playa d'Ar, that's Spain. I can't remember what it's called, but I've got the photographs of it. It's wonderful. Any case, so that came to an end. And then I did various other things. Georgie Fame was at his peak in the late 60s, early 70s. So I had a wee 5, 6-piece band, and I bought myself a Hammond organ as well. I came to try anything. And we had a guy, Andy Hampton, on baritone and flute, and I've completely forgotten his name now, but very famous, the guy, very famous, and I've forgotten his name, an Edinburgh guy, tenor player, who wrote I'm a Japanese Girl for Anika, who's Mary Sanderman, in very early 70s. During this conversation, his name will come back to me because I know him so well. I see him once every 10 years regularly. Oh, how are you? And it was loads of fun. Got married in 73, and kind of prior to then, I'd done another band with which was really a covers band, pop covers band. And everything I did was just trying different things that I'd never tried before. Got married, did nothing. And in the first year of marriage, I don't know how it happened, but the opportunity arose to rekindle Old Bailey's Jazz Advocates. Archie Sinclair was killed in a car accident in the late 69, I think it was. He was killed in an accident, very sad. And I reformed, in effect, his band and got all the original guys, Graham Brummeyer, Donald Chick Murray on the drums, Johnny Harper on banjo, Andy Lauder on trumpet, myself, and Sam Smith, who was the replacement. Again, these guys are no longer, Sam, no longer with us. And we kicked off in the Queensferry Arms, I think it was, in South Queensferry in the summer of 1973. And from there, that band went over to Dunkirk and won the Dunkirk Jazz Festival, which was an amateur thing, but it was a fun thing to do. Funny enough, Mike's band, the Society Syncopators, went over the year before. Guys like Johnny McGuff, who again is no longer with us. And it was a great time. And then the dates I can't really remember, but I remember that Mike and I got together. The Old Bailey band was again working. There wasn't nearly as much work going around then because things had moved on. The Beatles had been and gone by then. I mean, by the early 70s, up to mid 70s. But places like the Fountain Inn in Edinburgh, who music lovers, we did gigs twice a week there, and whatever else was going. Mike and I, because Mike was playing in the band, then Johnny Harper left, went professional, went over to Norway. But Mike joined the band with Tom Fillion piano, and we agreed that there wasn't enough work in town for two bands off that genre. Other things were happening as well. It just wasn't the work. So we merged effectively to become. It wasn't All Bailey Jazz Advocates. It was the Scottish Society Advocates. I can't remember the name of the band. With that band, we did about 3 or 4 albums, which were all self-promotions in a way. But it was very successful because Mike had entree at that time. He had just started the Jazz Festival, I think, in 70. You'll know the dates better than I.
78, 78, I think, was the first one.
Okay. Which he very kindly involved me in, meaning you've got a van, haven't you? Right, you can handle PAs around the venues, and everybody was dragged in to do things. It was wonderful. 78, yeah, that would be right. That's when we got together. And that band went over to Sacramento, which was the then, up until its demise, probably the biggest jazz festival of its kind in the world. It attracted about 130 bands, some pro, some happy amateurs doing their thing. And it was designed to attract all the retirees in the US, if you will, in that period. And a retiree at 65 would go back 35, 40 years and say, what was I dancing to when I was at university? And of course, the answer is it was the late 20s, early 30s. So the music we were playing was nostalgic, and that was the retro of that time. And very nostalgic. So we got a kind of lease of life through that. And again, with Mike, I went with him, or he and I together, the band. We went to Poland. We did a tour in Poland. I'm saying this right off the top of my head. I have photographs and stuff to remind me of what we did do. But it was a great time. And I remember clearly in the early 80s, 82, 83, on one of our trips to America, a very dear guy, who introduced me to a guy called Louis Jordan. He gave me a tape. He said, you dig this guy. Listen to it. Have a listen. See what you think. And I instantly I thought, wow, this guy is very special. And of course, in the late 30s and 40s through the Second World War and afterwards, he was hugely successful. This guy was in all the V records of 78s of the day, Louis Jordan. And then my interest suddenly expanded into Cab Calloway and all sorts of other area. But again, because we'd moved from the 70s to the 80s, the retro became late 30s to 40s. Every 10 years, the retro moved. Right now, if you were to ask what is retro, it's the Beatles aren't even retro. ABBA's not retro. We're almost in the 80s now, aren't we? That's retro to people who were at university 50, and then 50 years on, or 40 years on. In any case, that was the theory behind it. So so in '83, I left Mike's. I left that form of jazz, the sort of Dixieland, for want of a better word, traditional 7/8 piece band, doing just kind of swing and just well Kent songs, and started a thing called Fat Sounds Band, which has been a vehicle for me, which it ran for 30 years until 5 years ago when I put it to bed, and it was just a joy to be with, because it started off primarily as a jump jive band. A guy called Joe Jackson, you might have heard of. He's a English pop artist. Again, in the very early 80s, '83, he did a tribute to Calloway and Louis Jordan on a jump jive album, using some great guys out of London in his band. So it was just tight. I mean, I think I'm right. In fact, I know I'm right in saying, no, Tom Gordon, our mutual friend from Dunfermline, he played with Ray Gelato. He was involved with Ray Gelato. But there were bands doing, and there was a wee upsurgence of that style of jive and swing stuff, along with all the dance clubs, which were doing a kind of revival-y type thing round about that time as well. They still exist, funnily enough. There's still more dancing, swing dancing in Edinburgh than you'd be amazed. And of course, the style of music they listen to has to be 4/4 and a kind of bouncy tempo. That's what they like. So Fat Sounds, what can I tell you? A huge number of musicians were involved over the 30 years. It was a 9-piece band, and it was essentially 3 reeds, 2 brass, and a 4-piece rhythm section. And the first 30, I also realized almost instantly when I decided to do this that you couldn't just get 9 people around and say, "This is what I want you to play, have a go." That's not how it works. You couldn't do that. So there had to be something, and a thing called music suddenly raised its ugly head. What's music? Oh my God, dots! Oh, wow. In any case, the only guy who knew who could give me what I think I needed was Tommy Sampson, the big band leader who's a legend in his own lifetime, obviously. And so he did the first 30 charts, which gave me effectively a 1.5-hour program to launch the band on. And Kevin Doyle very kindly gave me the first gig for the band on Valentine's Day, 1985, down in Leith, in a pub which he just opened that day, funnily enough. And the smell of drying paint on a hot radiator was just about knocked us over. In any case, band went live then. A guy called Nick Robertson, who was son of Graham Robertson, a great Edinburgh trombone player. Again, sadly, all these fantastic guys no longer with us. But Nick's still around down south. He was our singer for 4 years. I played alto and soprano and clarinet. And the first lineup was Bill Simpson on tenor and I think soprano. And that, yeah, then it was just two reeds. Robin Gus Ferguson on trumpet, and Graham Robertson trombone, Kenny Matheson from the West, from Uddingston on drums, Tony Howard on guitar, who's East Lothian, and Bobby Miller on double bass and bass guitar. I could switch between the two, and Tom Finlay on piano. So that was the first 9-piece. I mean, the first thing I did was having got these 30 odd numbers nailed, and they sounded pretty good, very tight. Was I recorded it, and we produced I'm going to say Boogie on Down, Jive on Down was the first set of recordings we put out. Jive on Down. It was a tape, cassette tape in those days. Wow, I mean, amazing. But that cassette tape went round umpteen jazz festivals all over the place. I did a big push on the thing, and on the back of that, the band went to France, Holland, Europe in general, Germany. We never got a gig in Spain, funnily enough. I don't know why. And UK jazz festivals. So Fat Sam's, almost instantly, was a success. There was a place called the Good Time Emporium in Edinburgh, which is down from, let's say, Jock's Lodge. It's not Jock's Lodge, but it's where Honda Car Agency used to be, whatever that's called. Any case, it's no longer there. It was Stuart's Ballroom, I think, originally. And so we were resident there 2 nights a week, which was a great kickoff for the band. Because when you start a band, you're never quite sure where the work's coming from in very tough times when there wasn't work for bands at all. I mean, in general. Certainly not a 9-piece band. That was quite sort of ambitious, a lot of mouths to feed. Any case, in the late or in the very early 85, I met a guy who was about to embark on a restaurant project in Edinburgh, which he wanted to call Fat Sam's. And I was very curious, just to find out whether or not my Fat Sam's, which we'd done, was anything, was there common ground here? And it transpired that his concept of Fat Sam's, which subsequently opened in '86, summer of '86, was like a Chicago-style themed diner, and it was Italian food, full of gadgets and memorabilia and Al Capone type things and what have you. So, ironically, the band just dovetailed in. And in fact, the artwork which we used for the band, which was a sort of a jovial black guy in a very powerful pinstripe suit and spatted shoes and diamond rings and big cigar and a Homburg hat, became the logo for the diner. Fat Sam's Diner was above their door. And we therefore landed that residency for 15 years. And it was, until it closed, it was the longest residency in town at that point. And all I can tell you is from that, the band went to Canada, America, all over Europe, English festivals, and was hugely successful. I mean, the names of some of the guys, we were very privileged to have Jack Duff playing with us for 2-3 years before he passed. John Burgess was with the band for 3 years in a metamorphic state, because it went over 3 decades. Every 10 years, I had to move the material because we were doing retro. I mean, I realized what we were doing and why we were doing it. And we started off with the Louis Jordan Camp Calloway as being the entire program virtually. And by the time we'd finished 30 years later, we were doing the Blues Brothers on commercial gigs. We weren't doing that on jazz or festival type work. But we had a repertoire laterally, which we could play for in excess of 9 hours without repeating ourselves. Everything orchestrated. And it was a very exciting time for arrangers as well, because the concept of computers being able to identify lengths of note and pitches and using MIDI functions and all this thing was in its infancy. Prior to, when Tommy Sampson was doing it, it was all pen and paper and transcribing alto saxes up, so on and so forth, and all this kind of stuff. So so I mean, it taught me a lot as well, because I have programs on my computer, and what you hear is what you get, and it's so arranging is kind of, you've got an ear for it, apart from all the things you're supposed to understand. Um, it's kind of doable for the layman, and I consider myself very much a layman. I know where I want to be, and I know my limitations, and but I have ideas, I have ideas. In any case, so as I say, Fat Sam's. I eventually, Nick left the band 4 years after we kicked off, and I moved from being a sideman to the singer, or as I prefer to call it, the crooner, because I'm not really a singer. I can just about hold a melody, um, and yeah, that's history. In any case, that Fat Sam's came to an end. We did our final concert, 30 years in one day, to the date when it started on the 15th of February, 99, in the Queen's Hall, to a sellout crowd. We raised, it was a charity, we did it for charity, and we raised well over 10 grand for Maggie's on that night, which was a nice thing to do. And David Batchelor very kindly helped me with the presentation, because we managed to retrieve video footage going back 30 years of the start days and all the daft things we'd done. We played jazz in a swimming pool once. I mean, in the pool, in the water, in Los Angeles. It was daft things we did, but it was all good fun. It was a very happy band. I think the raison d'etre, or my raison d'etre, was we have to communicate with people. There's no point playing wonderful music if people are, for want of a better word, falling asleep, or if we're falling asleep playing it. I mean, the whole point of making music is audiences paid to get in. They want to be entertained. You have to connect with them. And so, all my program, any programs I would produce for a 1 hour or 1.5 hour set or whatever it was, within the first 3 numbers, you had to grab an audience. You've probably got less than that. You've only got the first number to really grab an audience. And if you haven't got them by then, it's a tough gig. So I would always aim to have them fully on side within 3, and then you can do. It's like a good book. Page 1 to 10 is really what it's going to sell it for you. By the time you get to page 300 in the middle, they can be telling you all sorts of interesting and non-related facts, and you'll take them in. You'll be on side because you're into it. And music's the same for me. It's always been that way. Get them on side, and then you can do sweet, nice things, or play around with them. And you have to end up the way as well. Your finale is very, very important. Your last 4 numbers, any set, critically important. I guess my life, that's how I've fashioned my musical life. In any case, when the Fat Sam closed in 99, I didn't want to stop playing. And I decided that I would actually I would do a retro for me and go kind of back to what I was doing in the very beginning, which was the British tradie thing. And at that point, Accurate Bilk had just passed. I think it passed in 94. And so I decided to do, it was Roger that helped the concept by using the term remembering Acker. And so a new band was developed. Colin Sealand, trumpet, just wonderful, wonderful trumpet player, and just I call him a musical chameleon, because I'm sure I don't understand all the genres he does, but he covers so many genres so well, from modern bop to, I don't know, you name all the things that I wouldn't know and couldn't possibly hope to do. He does them all. And then he came into my genre and said, "What do you need me to do?" And I said, "Well, Louis would be quite good, or whatever." And no problem with that. And he plays beautiful stuff and great melody and great lead. David Batchelor and Tom Campbell Norman, must have been on piano right from the word go, pretty much. Alistair Morrow on drums, Ed Kelly, double bass, and Eric Wales, who was my guitar player with Fat Sam's for the last sort of 15 years. He stepped in on that seat, and yeah, and so all I'm doing now is remembering some of my icons of the British scene, and then the year one it was remembering Acker, but that program was still there. Then it was Acker and Kenny Ball. We did in festivals his sort of top 10 iconic songs, which everybody's probably got a 45 somewhere stacked. You know, if you're aged 70 or over, you could well have Midnight in Moscow somewhere in your dusty archives of 45s, and so on and so forth. And then Chris Barber, I'm not sure how well he is right now, but in any case, as a tribute to him, we brought in a bunch of stuff which he would be iconically known for. So we have a sort of Paul Barber Bill tribute type thing, and it's all great fun, and that's what I'm doing to this day. Amongst, I got the call when very sadly Forrie Kearns couldn't continue to play. I think this was about 5 years ago with Lenny and Alistair and Roy Percy with Quattroman Jazz. I got a phone call where I'd like to play Clarence, and I was thrilled and honored. And so that has been as much what I've been doing over the last 5 years. And it's great to play with these guys. Great to be playing full stop. I'm not playing at all just now, so that's pretty miserable. But then none of us are.